Hi, good afternoon. This is I'm Louis Laves-Webb, and I am going to be speaking again today with Robbie Price, Senior Associate here at the practice.
Happy to be here.
good to see you again. And we want to talk specifically today around veterans and therapy and some of the specific situations, issues, things that veterans kind of contend with and deal with, both personally and as veterans, and then also with respect to therapy and kind of what that looks like, and maybe differentiate them in particular ways from some of the things that they contend with.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just wanted to kind of open up and say, Robbie, what are some of your experiences with veterans, and what kind of needs do you feel like that population has that maybe a little bit unique or specific to them versus a civilian population?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, one thing that kind of sticks out to me is just right when you were saying that, I associated to like this loss of tribe, this loss of community and connection that helped them through hard times.
Right.
And and it is a different culture. It is a different environment that rips. It's pretty. Times where you have to be very hyper vigilant and you're pretty hyper aroused in those and dysregulated in those states. And when you're getting out, this loss of tribe, and what do I do with this? And there comes this sense of loneliness and isolation that takes place. That causes.
So you're talking about the assimilation back to civilian
back to
culture
extremely hard, extremely hard. And I think a lot of people they feel misunderstood in that, and why they can't reintegrate back into society a lot of the times because they're holding so much. And another thing that kind of little side tangent here, but this piece that stood out to me, I was thinking on the way here.
Yeah.
And I want to say it was like a Bonnie Badenoch, who's an interpersonal neurobiologist, was either presenting some research she found or she was just speaking to it, and it was really profound to me, and it kind of speaks to the veteran community a lot. There was research on child soldiers, and
in Africa, that sort of thing.
Yes,
yeah.
And she was curious why some developed PTSD and why others didn't. And she found that the ones that were developed PTSD were very isolated. They had no community around them. They weren't talking. They were very kind of on the outside of society, and it spiraled, and it made it worse. And the ones that didn't develop PTSD, they had a lot of community around them, and they were always talking about it. And they had people that have gone through the same things talking about it with them.
Yeah.
So how important that is, and that just applies to our veterans.
Yeah, absolutely. It also makes me think. It seems like there's some generational differences within veterans. I know a lot of kind of Vietnam vets in that era. They tend to like more groups and have support groups and VFW halls and things like that. And in my experience working with vets is some present day vets, they tend to kind of isolate more. They're like, I'm just going to deal with this on my own. And so I think there's some generational kind of cultural things at play there. But what you're saying is that isolation can actually exacerbate some of the problems that are going on.
And there's a high suicide rate. There's a sense of lots of homelessness.
Of course.
That's caused from the mental health, and it's really sad. Absolutely.
What I mean, obviously you and I are proponents of getting help, getting counseling. What are some of the kind of maybe barriers to getting help for veterans that maybe the civilian might be blind to or not really get or realize?
Yeah, I think there's especially in that subculture with the military, can be a lot of stigma around needing help, and there's kind of pick yourself up by your bootstraps and let's go, and that type of mentality, which has been very beneficial for them, and to switch into to be able to say I need help is really hard. There's a lot of shame around it, that you're weak and you're not meant for this, and therefore you're kind of like not part of the tribe in a way.
So the emphasis on self-reliance, picking yourself up by bootstraps, although can be really helpful in that environment.
Yes.
As you're adjusting back, may actually kind of be a hindrance, contribute to some more
Absolutely.
of the PTSD type symptoms or depression or anxiety or other things maybe going on.
Absolutely.
That makes sense.
And it's hard, like this is what helped me survive
Right.
this type of energy, and now you want me to let it go?
Right. Totally.
And
There's some resistance to that.
yeah, how could there not be?
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is what keeps me going.
Yeah. The other thing I think about is as a therapist. I mean, I work with a number of vets. I know you do as well, and you're also a veteran yourself. I think the needs and the expectations from the therapist are a little bit different as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what I've seen is that it's even more important for me to be a human being, for me to treat them with respect, for me not to pander to them, to not sugarcoat things, to be more clear and just upfront about stuff. And that's, I've kind of learned that over time, over 20 plus years of doing counseling. But I think that's really helpful for them. I think any kind of, and I say that as a generalization, but that's been my kind of clinical experience. And I think kind of pandering or kind of playing it soft or not being authentic or whatever you want to say, I just think they see a lot of them see right through that and just aren't going to be interested in getting that kind of therapy. Is that fair to say?
Oh, definitely, absolutely. They, to use the metaphor, be in the trenches with them, and you know that you're real and that you're here with them going through. Be able to talk about the hard things and be able to share parts of yourself. They gotta know you're real. It's not this, this little more psychoanalytic
it's not
blank
It's
slate.
not a blank slate.
No, you have to be there with them in relational. They need to know. They gotta feel you too, and that you can meet them there.
Gotcha.
Absolutely.
What are your, if you were to just kind of pinpoint, what is your biggest area of compassion? Like, where does your heart go when you think about the veteran population in our country and how we can help support them? I mean, what just in your heart, where do you go? I mean, obviously, they hold a special place for both of us, and we want to support them the best we can. And it's not an easy situation.
No, it's not. As you're saying, I'm just kind of dropping into my heart around that. And there's a sense of sadness and a sense of the amount of loneliness that is there. And my hope and desire is to get veterans and to have a community, to feel more connected with people. I'm a huge fan of groups, group therapy, and I feel that can be your new tribe to kind of go into the trenches with.
Yep.
And that's where my heart goes, and wanting them to have that sense of connection.
So that they don't feel so isolated and alone with it. Yeah,
it's painful.
Yeah, it is. And that can start just in one-on-one therapy.
Absolutely.
Right? And so, I mean, I work with a number of vets who, in essence, live in a one-bedroom apartment, have a firearm next to their bed, eat beans and rice, and just kind of, on some level, have really just checked out. And I have compassion for that. I have empathy for that, and it deeply saddens me at the same time.
Yeah.
So I think we're talking about relationships in general, right? And intimate relationships. I think about with vets, and some of the, in particular, struggles and challenges that can come from just some of the intimate relationships after some of what they've gone through. And coming back, it reminds me. I worked with this man who was doing recon in Vietnam before the war, and he was shot down. He was a pilot, shot down a couple different times, and he was like drinking water from a puddle, just to survive, to deal with snakes and all kind of stuff. And the other day he says, I'm outside and watering the flowers, and I take a drink from the garden hose, and my wife says, honey, that's dirty. You shouldn't drink from that. And he was just like, I don't, in essence, he was saying, I don't even know how to conceptualize that difference, right, between what it means to be a civilian and kind of the reality, so to speak, versus my reality and what I've gone through. It really, really stuck with me. Just that some of that difference is how do you bridge that gap, and how do you assimilate and kind of come back, and it takes some time.
Yeah.
I don't think
A lot of
so.
time.
A lot of time.
Yeah.
I think
It's
there's
just,
no question
you know,
about
light
that.
switch to that.
Mhm.
And just to be in, it's totally different. It almost feels like two different worlds in a way.
Can you say more about that?
It's like, because you're in this culture and in this environment where it is existential.
Mhm.
There is a lot of people's lives on the line, and lots of different things where you're living in this kind of more hyper vigilant,
Mhm.
motivated by fear kind of place.
And that's pretty 24/7.
24/7,
Mhm.
and you never know. And you were for years because
Mhm.
you go into this, and when you get out, all of a sudden, like, what world am I in? I'm at Home Depot right now,
Right.
checking out, and this is where it's at. Like,
And
it's
we'll-
just two different places, and that to drop from that level in your nervous system, be revving that high
Yeah.
for so long, you don't. When you get out, you don't just go to your baseline,
Okay.
back to it. You go under it, and that's why there is a depressed place that they hide, and that's where people in depression tend to isolate.
Right.
That's part of it. What people tend to do, and
So you're saying because you're revving that high for that long in that kind of intensity, when you come out of it, you actually drop below baseline into more depression. That's pretty common. That's pretty normal.
absolutely, it's a deficit. It's like you have it even with dopamine hits.
Right.
There's going to be, if you get too high, you're going to have a deficit.
Mm-hmm.
You don't just come back to the baseline. It's kind of the same thing.
Makes sense. Any advice before we close? Just on any advice you would have for vets that may be watching this or maybe struggling and never even thought about asking for help based on different cultural norms or kind of ideas about therapy or anything else, or any advice that you would give to them or any hopes that you would have for them?
If I were to be speaking to them, I would say that I want them to know that they're not alone, and that there are people here that can connect and meet you there and get in the trenches with you around whatever you're holding and speaking to, and whatever you're navigating in your life. And there is a community still here and a tribe that can be found. That'd be my hope, my fantasy, that it is here, and wanting them to know that.
I appreciate that. So really the relational, the group piece you're really highlighting just how important that actually is. And as a civilian, you have to create it, right? Because when you're in the military, it was kind of created inherently.
Oh yeah.
And that's part of the challenge in civilian life is you have to create your own structure, and that's forget about the trauma, forget about the hypervigilance, just all else being equal, that going from a place that here's your structure to you can really do whatever you want. And you've got to create your structure. That in and of itself can be whether it's how do you take care of your health, how do you have a supportive structure, supportive friends, a supportive group. What kind of work do you do? How do you go to get your food and groceries and laundry? I mean, all those kinds of things become something that's really individual in our society. And our society is going to be more individual, not less.
Yep.
Right? And so as you come out of the group kind of thinking, the group emphasis in the military, then to complete individualism, wow.
Yeah, it's a huge shift.
That's a huge shift.
And it's praised that our society around the individualism, and it's almost counter dependent. It's the opposite.
It is. Yeah, it's not healthy dependency.
No, it's not. And so.
Yeah, I've always said everybody has this dream that they want to be wealthy enough where they can basically live on a ranch that's 100 acres and never have to talk to anybody. And I have that dream too, right? I'm sure you do.
Yeah.
That's the dream. But it's like, what's that about? Like, why is there so much emphasis on I don't want to have to talk to anybody, right? Or I don't want to have to deal with people. That's probably not ultimately the healthiest way to
No, I can
dream.
join you. There's two pools. I can join you. It's like I have that pool, and then at the same time I think about it, like, well, I don't want to, that sounds kind of lonely in itself to just be out there by myself. At the same time, it sounds great. It's
right.
just cool.
Exactly. So there's that dichotomy within us. But the emphasis on leaning into the relationships more.
Yes.
Thank
and
you.
if anything, wanting to invite that.
Yes.
And I know that takes time and it builds trust, and especially around something that has so much stigma around it.
Yeah.
That someone can meet you there.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for
Thank
speaking
you.
about this. I know this area means a lot to both of us, and appreciate everything you've done and the work that you've done with veterans today. So,
I appreciate you guys. Thank you.
You bet.